May 2nd, 1945 AD, the fall of Berlin. On May 2nd, 1945 AD, the capital of Nazi Germany, Berlin, fell to the Soviet and Polish forces after the defenders agreed to an unconditional surrender after over 2 weeks of fighting. The commander of the Berlin defense, General Helmut Wilding, waited until the death of Goebbels, who was appointed successor to Hitler, to formally surrender unconditionally to the Soviet Red Army. Goebbels, who spent the day before wearing Hitler's old uniform and acting like queen for a day before killing himself and his family by poisoning themselves with cyanide, he still thought Berlin could hold out against the Soviets. The highest-ranking Nazi left inside the Führer bunker was Hans Krebs, and according to Hitler's secretary, Traudi Jung, he looked worn out and exhausted. In the early morning of May 2nd, he killed himself with his pistol, along with his sidekick, General Wilhelm Bergdorf, inside the bunker. It was up to Wilding to formally surrender Berlin to the Soviets, so he wrote a formal letter to the Soviet commander stating, "On April 30th, 1945, the Führer committed suicide and thus abandoned those who have sworn loyalty to him. According to the Führer's order, you German soldiers would have to go on fighting for Berlin despite the fact our ammunition has run out and despite the general situation which makes our further resistance meaningless. I order the immediate cessation of resistance. Every hour you keep on fighting prolongs the suffering of the civilians in Berlin and our wounded. Together with the commander-in-chief of the Soviet forces, I order you to stop fighting immediately." Wilding later met with the Soviet commander Vasily Zhukov to officially surrender the city and was taken into custody along with his remaining staff. The Soviet Red Army captured the Reichstag building and raised the flag above it, signaling the defeat of the Nazis. The Polish army also raised their banner on top of the Berlin Victory Column. Despite the order to surrender, pockets of resistance occurred throughout the city, but it ended up being reduced to rubble by the Soviet tanks and artillery, while many others made a run for the U.S. Army lines, which were more Nazi-friendly. A group of Hitler acolytes, soldiers and civilians, led by SS officer Peter Hogel, Yvonne Lindlof, and Hans Rattenhuber, made a run for the Wiedendammer Bridge after leaving the Führer bunker. Hogel and Lindlof were shot several times and died from their wounds, while Rattenberg was captured by the Soviet Red Army. Hitler's chauffeur, Erich Kempka, snuck out of Berlin with the help of a Yugoslavian girl who gave him some civilian clothes to change into. He was almost caught by a company of Soviets, but played dumb before escaping. Another group snuck out of the Führer bunker, led by Martin Bormann and Hitler's surgeon, Ludwig Stumpfegger, who were accompanied by Werner Naumann and head of the Hitler Youth, Arthur Axmann. Bormann and Stumpfegger killed themselves after being pinned down by the Soviets. By the end of the day, most of the city was captured by the Soviet and Polish armies. The city was completely devastated. What wasn't destroyed by the Soviet and Polish invaders was previously dismantled by Hitler's Nero Decree, which ordered most of the city's infrastructure to be destroyed a few months earlier. It took a few more days, however, to flush out the last pockets of resistance, made up of SS officers, soldiers, and civilian conscripts known as the Volkssturm, who were armed with old rifles and Panzerfists, refused to surrender. Some of the Soviet soldiers began to commit atrocities such as rape and murder in revenge for the frequent guerrilla attacks committed after the surrender of the city. Over 100,000 German civilians were reportedly killed in the next few weeks after the Battle of Berlin officially ended.